Hey, Paul, let's get your thoughts on something that is very interesting that's been taking place, in my opinion, in Toronto the last 2 to 3 years. I'm born and raised here. I've seen the NASL days and now MLS with TFC, but I want your thoughts. I want your opinions because you come from Europe, England, where it is 24/7 coverage on the pitch and off the pitch. Have we taken off in an upward spiral here in Toronto with coverage on TFC, with Defoe, Jovinko, and with the men's national team, do you believe? Or do you still see that we are way, way behind in coverage as they do in Europe?
Well, I mean, I think there's definitely an upswell, but I mean, point proven this week when I think the EPL domestic rights went for 3 years, and I think it was £5 billion. So kind of what the NHL sought for here, but on a quarter less contract length of time, and then plus that was only domestic rights. I mean, they still yet to sell international rights. So I mean, there's obviously a lot of money in the game. But I agree with you. I mean, I think certainly the coverage of football, soccer in this country is certainly trending upwards. And as I'm sure you agree with me, I mean, I think it's only a good thing. And in this city particularly, Toronto FC are really gung-ho on not losing the momentum that they gained at the first part of last year. Obviously, it didn't work out the way they wanted, but credit to them that they're putting their hands in their pockets again and then re-upping up.
Paul, something that I have been used to when in Italy and the coverage there away from the pitch that I'm glad we haven't gotten here yet is some of the off-pitch scandals, whether it's this player dating this girl or whether it's this player getting divorced with his wife of so many years. I'm kind of glad that we haven't dipped into that. But do you believe someday we might get into that type of a coverage, that it's gotten big enough here?
Well, I mean, you have to take a look at the NHL. I mean, I don't believe, certainly, having worked in newspapers in London and here, although I must admit, I didn't work at the Sun or the Star or whatever in England, but there isn't really the will at a newspaper level here to really kind of make sports stars in this town. I mean, the closest thing I guess would be Dion Phaneuf and Elisha Cuthbert, but still, it's not anywhere close to Beckham and Posh Spice or any of Ryan Giggs' exploits off the field, or things that have really graced maybe a bad word, but that have been front page fodder in England in recent years.
Do you feel, Paul, in the years that you've been following TFC here, that the Toronto media, I mean, I was called at one point by a number of the scribes here, and actually with Tim Bazbachenko, I remember meeting him way back in March a year ago, and, talking to him about all sorts of things in the city, and he was warned in advance about myself and my style and my big mouth. But he says, this is what it is in Europe. This is nothing compared to Europe. Do you feel too many guys here in this market are too soft in many ways, where they're not going hard at real soccer stories? Forget the other garbage, but I'm talking real soccer stories.
I think I mean, part of the problem is in this, and maybe it's a double-edged sword. I mean, you get so much more access over here as a journalist, as a sports journalist. I mean, you get to go in the dressing room. You get, you're on the training field. None of that happens in England. I mean, don't forget Alex Ferguson. I've already talked to the BBC, for one of the main rights providers for soccer in England for a good 10, 15 years, because he was angered at something that had come out about his son as a football agent. So over here, you get all this access, and yet there's nothing's ever really said. Whereas in England, because you don't get the access, I think to an extent there's a real effort on the part of the newspapers that are trying to sell copies and drive hits to their websites to almost, you get a grain of truth and you blow it into a whole sandpit. And whereas here it's you get the news straight from the horse's mouth, but most of the time the news isn't worth reporting.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, Paul. Let me ask your opinion on this and how you saw it outplayed in England and other parts of Europe. When some, media individual that covers the team breaks a trade and gives out a tweet breaking the trade, do you feel a need in giving credit to that? a newspaper, radio station, TV station? Because I tell you what, I know that 95% of the guys that we deal with here in our city, in our industry, are real top-notch guys and guys that would never, ever stoop low. But has that happened back home in England? I know in Italy it does quite a bit, but has it happened in England where someone would take credit for someone else tweeting or talking about a trade they broke?
Well, I'm not sure they necessarily take credit, but I think they definitely try and blur the line to lead you back to where it originally came from. It's almost irrelevant once someone has reported a news. The fact that it's out there makes it fair game, it seems, for everyone else to jump on board and follow up without really ever kind of saying, well, this was first broken by, such and such a publication. So, I think there's a different ethics, I think, in England, certainly when it comes to football journalism. It is obviously, what do you have? You have a good almost 10 daily newspapers in England, and that's at the national level, based out of London, that are trying to break stories on the Premier League every single day. That it just kind of blows it out of the water.
For the most part, Paul, I've had a lot of dealings with a lot of TFC players over the years, and for the most part, all the conversations we'd had away from the pitch has always been off the record, and I've given my word to that. But unfortunately, sometimes you see that when you say it's off the record, it then becomes on the record, and that player really looks bad in the light of that information that comes out. Has, in your experience, that happened in England? And has it really put a stain on the industry we work in?
Well, I think it's just a gun-shy attitude in England amongst the players. There was never a better case in point than Jermaine Defoe coming here. The first home game, that locker room at BMO Field was full to the gills of cameramen, photojournalists, regular journalists, columnists, whatever, and you could barely move. And once Jermaine sat down and was officially you're on the clock, as in people, the crowd, the scrum around his locker. And he had this wide-eyed, he was in his underwear. He'd just come out of the shower, and you just don't get that in England. And I think England, journalists in England, soccer players in England are so not used to doing it that it's just this incredible lack of trust between them and the media. That they really, whereas over here, I think people are a little bit more trusting because there's such much more of an open relationship with the media. And I've been out with players over here, which generally doesn't happen in England. You have to be really buddy-buddy with some of these guys to get them to go out with you to the point where they know that what is said is off the record and it's never going to show up in a publication.